Bienvenue to your press conference. Welcome, welcome. So I'm going to start by a very quick introduction. To my left, Thurman. At the end of the table, the producer of the film, David Gonzalez.
Hi.
Monsieur Richard Gere. And Monsieur le réalisateur, Paul Schrader. Paul, if you don't mind, before I open the floor to questioning, I will start with you and a very simple question. Why did you want to adapt Russell Banks? Why did you want to adapt this story?
The answer is really quite simple. He got sick. He was a very close friend ever since Affliction. And I would spend summers in the Adirondacks with him and Chase. And I was going to go summer before last, and he said, you can't come. You know, I've got cancer. I'm going through chemo. And I knew he had written a book several years before about the depredations and the degradations of death. He called it his Ivan Illich. And I said, I better read that book. It was called Foregone. And so I read it. I wanted to make it for Russell and for me. So it became my Ivan Illich. And one last thing is, he had wanted to call the book Oh, Canada. But when it came out at the same time in New York, there was Richard Ford, also an upstate New York writer, had a book called Canada. So there were two books out same month, Canada, Oh, Canada. So Russell had to change his title. And so when he found out that I wanted to do it, he said, please use the title that I originally wanted, Oh, Canada. So that's why the title changed.
Richard, when you love actors, watching a Paul Schrader movie is a delight. We know that the performance will be absolutely beautiful. It's a case here. So I wonder what kind of actor-director he is, and how does he work with you guys?
I think Richard should go.
Good morning, everyone. This was a long night. My voice is much lower today. You know, Paul, I mean, we made the movie 40-something years ago. And
people tell me 45. It's hard to believe.
I think it was
just say a few decades.
Yeah. And, of course, I haven't changed at all in 45 years. You know, Paul, I recall it when we worked together a long time ago. Paul, he had a very clear idea of what he wanted to do with American Gigolo. And we were looking at a lot of films. He was showing me a lot of Alain Delon films, actually. I haven't thought about this in a while.
Yeah, no, I showed him Purple Noon, La Plein Soleil. I said, look at this guy. He knows one thing for certain. He knows that when he steps into a room, it's a better place. And so I said, just look at him. And
so he was showing me this kind of stuff. And it was, I can't say, I mean, in the meantime, and that was a whole new character for me. I hadn't played anyone like him, which is why I wanted to do it. And so I learned how to be this character. But 45 years later, I think Paul, people ask that, I said, he's gotten a little crustier in the meantime, but he's earned that. And, you know, there's a shorthand at this point. I mean, he knows the movie he wants to make. He casts it with the people he wants. He trusts them to do what they do. I mean, there wasn't that, we talked quite a bit in the beginning, questions I had about what he was trying to do with this and where the character was coming from. And he was referencing Russell Banks quite a bit and showing me, I was finding videos, he had a lot of videos of Russell and photographs of him and his process of getting sick and later and closer to passing away. But on the set, you know, there was very little. It was very clear once we started shooting that what we were trying to do and where the character was.
well, in this new wave of technology, you can't drag your feet on the stage floor anymore. You know, Richard and I were saying we began 45 days was the normal for a shoot. Now it's around 2022. You're getting more footage in half the time. that means you have to work twice as fast.
Uma, you want to add something?
I mean, I would just say that it was a privilege to work with these two national treasures, as far as I'm concerned, and to be in the room with a master of cinema like Paul. It'd been too long for me. I was pinching myself and how calming it is. And watching him mentor the entire set, everyone's ear open to his word, because his film literacy, and his leadership is palpable and a pleasure, and I think brings everyone to a point of trying desperately to do their very best, and truly getting to see a glimpse of what the medium really is meant to be.
And David, a question for you. How is it to produce a Paul Schrader movie?
How is it to produce one?
A Paul Schrader movie.
This a gift, an honor, an opportunity of a lifetime. We did Master Gardener a couple years ago, and I've noticed a through line this morning. We shot that film during the worldwide pandemic, and we made this film during 2 unprecedented labor strikes the industry has not seen since, I think, 60 years. So it was challenging to get it up and running. We were cleared with like the SAG interim agreement mere days before they cut off WGA writer projects. I think 4 days. You're making me relive it now as I speak. but
No, and I was
it's a
going
privilege.
into a retreat at that point. So it was like, okay, I got to stop at a certain point. The strike is happening.
That's right.
So it was like, how do we get the 20 days in to shoot this thing? And
That's exactly right. So we made it by the skin of our teeth, but to work with Paul, Richard, Uma, Michael Imperioli, Jacob Elordi was a privilege, a true privilege, an honor.
We're going to take a first question. Sir.
Hello there, I'm Dariusz from Netzwerk.de Germany. It's a pleasure seeing you guys. Congrats on the movie. And I would like to ask Mr. Richard Gere about working on this character together with Jacob Elordi, because you play the same character at different stages in life. And I would like to know how you guys found common ground to craft this character. Thank you.
I didn't quite
Get all that? No. Hey, could you
We have a
list the
translator.
volume?
Yeah, sure.
The question is pretty simple.
That's a list of volumes.
Working on the same character with Jacob Elordi, how did you work on that together? Did you create
With Jacob.
With Jacob, did you create the character together since it's the same
No,
character?
we met, we had a reading of the script, which I always cringe that we have to go read the script, because movies don't sound good when you're sitting around reading them. And they never do. But this actually sounded pretty good. And almost the whole cast was there, but that was the first I had met Jacob. And he reminded me very much of my son, which was great. And I could see he was watching me, which is what I would do. He was going to be me younger. So he said he'd looked at a few of my early films and was about the same age that he was. And, you know, and I kind of reassured him, you know, about the accent that I would be using, the voice I would be using, and to keep it really simple and straightforward in terms of American regionalism, in terms of the voice. But it was, to tell you the truth, I just felt he has an incredible warmth to him and a humility about him. He's genuinely sweet, and he works hard. He comes in to work hard. So we were never in the same frame together, except once, which no one would probably notice. He's in the mirror of one shot.
Because of the compressed shooting schedule, we were often shooting different scenes, same general location. So be shooting young Richard and old Richard the same day. So they would physically cross paths, but not on screen.
And I'm much taller than him, as you all know. So we had to build him up a little bit.
Richard towers
Give him
over
some
him. But watching the film last night, just throwing it in from an actor point of view, I did notice Jacob Elordi capture the old Gere strut. Just he didn't overdo it, but I caught it.
All right, we got a question over there, Rodrigo.
Hi, question here from Brazil, Rodrigo Fonseca, Correio da Manhã. Question to Mr. Schrader. The film is somehow a tribute to the non-fiction filmmaking. I would like to know which documentary making inspired the character of Leo 5, and which documentary filmmaking inspired you?
Well, I didn't make that choice. That was done in the novel, So he was a documentary filmmaker in the novel, and I didn't change that. There's a couple scenes where the midlife Leonard Fife is teaching, and the image got kind of cropped, but there were a couple names on the board. One was Jean Rochemont. Another was Frederick Wiseman, and Don Pennebaker, which is of that generation that Leonard Fife would have been of. So, that's how I sort of would frame it in that generation of documentary filmmakers. And Wiseman is, I hear he's here, right? Is Wiseman in Cannes? Yeah. So.
All right, we got a question right here.
Hi, this is Cristiana Lievi, freelance journalist from Italy. This is a question for you, Richard Gere. Watching the movie yesterday, of course, I was thinking about the other movie 45 years ago, and I was wondering how basically it's an arch of your life, from the super sexy whatever to the man who is dying. So I was wondering what's still the same and what changed according to you in yourself, in your life, in your career.
What changed in my whole life? Is that what you're asking?
No, in this.
That's a long discussion.
What remained the same?
I wasn't thinking about myself at all in this process. So, but as I've been saying in some interviews, my father passed away a few months before Paul came to me with a project. And my dad was almost 101. He was just a few weeks short of 101. But he was living with me and my kids and my wife. And he was in a wheelchair, and he was clearly on his last days, but the way his mind was coming in and out of many different realities and many levels of consciousness, I think that's what I related to very much in this script, and realizing that, of course, we're all going there, where kind of linear reality has softened, and we're seeing everything in an equality of time. Time disappears completely. And I wanted to capture that with this movie. And Paul and I talked about, obviously we're moving in time in the movie, but we're seeing his mind do the same thing. It's more contrapuntal, like music exists on a page where the notes are on top of each other rather than following a kind of linear cause and effect. So that's kind of where I was coming from with this.
All right.
Hi. Hello. Hi, Matt Donnelly from Variety. Paul, this is for you. I want to talk about Leonard's physical exam for the Army, which is a moment we spend sort of barreling towards in the entire film. I think it was quite unexpected, just the way that plays out, so I'd love to know sort of how your vision is, how the audience should receive that scene, and did you have to sell Jacob Elordi on the jockstrap?
Well, I embellished it a little myself with magic marker. I think the wardrobe people were a little afraid to do too much, so I took that burden off their shoulders. What Russell captured in that book was there was a 2-3 year period where all young American men had to make a decision. That was the beginning of the draft until a few years later when it was clear that Vietnam was going to end. And everybody I knew had to make a decision. And so that's the genesis of Russell's book. So I got deferment for physical reasons. But my best friend went to Amsterdam as a CO. Richard sort of wandered around the country. Oliver Stone went to Vietnam and got an Oscar. So we all had to make a decision back then, and that's one of the core nugget underneath the whole novel and the film.
All right, we have a question for Thor here.
Hello. Hello, I'm from Georgia. Thank you for the question. My question goes to Mr. Richard. How do you think the films, for example, pictures, for example, faces like you, iconic faces, talking about the war, is changing reality or not? Because this is help us to realize where are we around never-ending wars, these hot points in the world, again and again and never-ending. Because some days ago, the Meryl Streep told us that she's from little town when she had a lot of friends who went in the war in Vietnam and never came back. I think that you had maybe some friends among you because you're the same age. I think the generation and generations, we are lost of a lot of peoples, but how the art, cinema, photography, actors can help the world to realize this reality. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi. The core question is, how can actors help?
How can the artist
faces,
help the
art,
world realize
Yes.
the
It's different
casualties of
parts
war?
art.
Okay, well, we're stand-ins. Actors are stand-ins. Writers are stand-ins. Dancers are stand-ins. And I think at core, we're all trying to figure out the same things. We're all equal human beings on this planet, and equal beings, animals included, and spirits included. We're all in this together. When I think that actors are able to tap into the general condition of being alive, and you talked about reality, in this specific reality that we coexist in, then I think we can illuminate the journey that we're all on. It's funny, if I look at myself as a young man, my son is an actor now, and I think I see early things that I have done. And I mean, I'm not the same person, there's a continuity there, but I can still see a human being. And that's what we relate to, is just seeing a human being that says, oh, yeah, I can relate to that, which immediately opens your heart. I think you were referring to the world we live in now. The problems come when we can't relate to each other as human beings, obviously. We don't see ourselves in others. This movie medium presents the world as us. And when it does, the communication is complete and mysterious. As in life, you know, when you see the other as ourselves, the problems go away naturally.
Got a question over there on the other side of the room.
Hi, here. I'm João Tunes from Jornal de Notícias, Portugal. Is a question to Mr. Schrader. Thank you so much for the film. After so many years of trying to find it, I finally bought your book, Transcendental Style on Film. So the question is, do you still think about Ozu, Dreyer, and Bresson when you prepare one of your films?
When I was a graduate student at UCLA, I had the presumption to write a book of theological aesthetics called Transcendental Style in Film, which thankfully for me has never gone out of print. And 4 years ago, I updated it with a new printing, a new introduction, and an essay called Rethinking Transcendental Style. And so what then was the kind of presumption of a 25-year-old university student then was seen through the lens of someone who had actually been making films for decades. And so it was an interesting chance for me to look back at it. And tomorrow night, I will be introducing the restoration of 4 Nights of a Dreamer.
Well, just follow up on that, since we are on this year's, you recently posted a photo of you, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas in this year's, and Francis was there yesterday or the day before, and George will be here next week. My question is pretty simple. Do you realize that you guys, what we call now the new Hollywood, you change, I don't know if you change the world, but you change, I think I can talk about everything, everyone in this room, our world. Do you realize that? Do you realize that you changed cinema forever when you were young and working with Martin Scorsese or Coppola and all the others?
It's me?
It's for you.
Yes.
Voilà.
The simple reason was that when the late 60s hit, the studios were in a period of crisis and anxiety. Warner's had been sold to a parking lot company. 20th was up for sale. Hello, Dolly, Paint Your Wagon. All those big films were going straight down. And all of a sudden, Easy Rider makes money. And everybody in the studio, there was a golden moment there for about 5 or 6 years where they actually wanted to hear what you thought. And you could walk into a studio and say, I know how to make you money. And they would actually listen to you. Not anymore, of course. But that was that period. So when everybody was pitching, and you went out, you pitched, and you got deals, and people listened to what you said. So we didn't know the long-term ramifications, but we knew we were the first generation that was doing this, coming out of film school. Our previous generation, Frankenheimer and Sidney Pollack, they're coming out of live television. We were the first generation coming out of film school, so we knew something was changing.
How cool is that?
Okay, we got a question over there. Yeah, thank you.
I represent TV Formula from a small and ancient nation of Georgia. And my question is to Mr. Richard Gere. I was wondering, we all know that not everybody gets equal and fair chances in life. And we also know that without your work, the world would not be the same today as it is. So my question was, what your advice would be to young film industry students in the country like mine, small country which is troubled through big neighbors next to us, where the young students are still defending their freedom and sovereignty in the streets like today, 40 days in a row. So what would advice of yours be for the young film industry students? Thank you for your answer.
Well, I have to take exception to one thing. She said that the world we live in today would not have been the same without us. Don't lay that on us. It's not our fault, please.
No, not but you being a living legend, what your advice would be?
Advice for young filmmakers?
Young filmmakers protesting and fighting for their right of freedom in countries like Georgia right now.
You only have one thing that no one else has, which is your own life history, your own narrative. And when you try to do something like somebody else, there's always going to be somebody else who's going to do it better than you do. The only thing you can really do is find that thing that you can bring to the table. Now, obviously, in a repressive social environment, that's very, very hard. And I was here at Cannes during Glasnost, and the sun was shining, and everyone thought New Russia was upon us. Well, it's not. It's gone again. And so, it's very hard to reach into another person's predicament, and just slap them on the back and say, congratulations, your country is better. Because we're not in control of that.
Richard?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. This is, it's a really good question. I was able, I'll make it as short as I can, but during the Soviet years was the best years of Soviet Russian cinema. And part of it was that because of the repression and the oppression, artists had to find more subtle ways to communicate. And I mean, really extraordinary films were being made on very difficult subjects in the former Soviet Union. When it changed and became much more corporate and capitalist, the films were not nearly as good. They were aping kind of Western stupid movies. So I think that, again, artists will find a way to communicate. And it doesn't have to be big budgets. I know it's hard to find money everywhere. I mean, it was hard for these guys to find the money to make this film with known actors, international actors. So I know it's difficult there. But I would say the same thing I'd say to Palestinian friends of mine. You know, it's not a question of money. It's a question of having something to say, and you will find it. Now, to say something that's of value is to work on yourself and to purify your heart and your mind as much as you can. So there is a generosity of spirit and even the semblance of a kind of wisdom that will come through the art and make it valuable. And you see this everywhere. You see it in the Middle East, great films that are coming out of the Middle East, and directors who, you know, were never seen again. This happens all over the world. Clean your heart, open your mind, you know, learn your craft, and be very brave.
All right, we got a question over there.
Hello. Hello, I'm Irina, Marie Claire, Ukraine, and my question to Paul and Richard Gere. Main hero in film O Canada now choosing go to the war. Now many of citizens in my country, Ukraine, are faced now with the fact they must go to the war. And my question, what would you do in real situation if it happens with you? You understand me?
The movie is talking about a guy who who's not going to don't want to go to Vietnam and go to Canada. And in Ukraine today, a lot of young people have to go to war. The question is, what would you do in this kind of situation today?
Well, I don't think anyone in Ukraine thinks they're going to an unjust war. Whereas in America, that was definitely the feeling of my generation. Even the people, like I mentioned, Oliver Stone, who went, he knew he was going to an unjust war. He decided to go. So I don't think there's a parallel between this dreadful situation in Ukraine and American colonialism in Vietnam, because it's the colonialists in this case are the Soviets, or the Russians, and as you, France here, you know very well about colonialism. The colonialism in Vietnam was American, so that's the parallel.
We got a question.
It's still a difficult question, though. I mean, it's still the issue of does one go to war? Does one pick up a gun? And I mean, that's always going to be an issue, no matter if it's a just war or an unjust war. Still, there's a question of can I kill someone? What do I do to defend my family? How close? Well, Paul's saying that wasn't our family. It was an unjust war. We didn't even know these people, and it was some stupid thing that Henry Kissinger got us involved in. Through lies and subterfuge and madness. It feels closer to the bone, obviously, when you're fighting for your country and you've been invaded and bombed and pillaged and all of that. But still, the more profound issue is, can I kill someone else? And we all ask ourselves that question. There's no answer to that one.
All right, toutes mes excuses, monsieur, à vous.
Bonjour, Gérard Chargé, Cinézoom. Je voudrais poser une question par rapport à la thématique du film, aussi bien à Paul qu'à Uma et à Richard. est-ce que vous iriez aussi loin si vous vous confiez devant une caméra pour parler de votre existence, de votre travail, jusqu'où vous iriez? Est-ce qu'il y a des limites? Et puis, Uma, j'aimerais que vous me parliez de votre personnage. Qu'est-ce qu'il représente pour vous? Parce qu'il est, vraiment important pour cette personne avec qui vous êtes marié.
Character is very important.
Et c'est vrai que sans
What
cette
would you do
femme, peut-être qu'il
without
n'aurait pas
this
été aussi loin.
lady? You would not
Two
go as
questions. The
far
first
as
one is
this.
for all of you. Would you go as far as the character is doing in the film, is telling your own story, in telling about your own life? Would you go as far as the character is doing in the film? In front of a camera, of course. Would you answer? Yeah, we'll start with you.
Well, Richard was saying the other day that his father, there were moments where he thought his father was going to confess something that he had kept hidden, and he didn't do it. So that's a decision that everyone makes: is do I unburden myself? And I suppose you don't know until that moment comes, when you say, "I've lived this lie long enough. Before I die, I'd like to tell the truth."
But these things of memory and what they work on us, none of it is definitive. It's not like we don't even know what a memory is in terms of how the brain is structured. And if there is something that has boundaries around it and a kernel called memory, but everything changes. Memories change. Everything evolves. The things that are in this film, they're presented as if those are real memories. But I think they're softer than that. They move, they change, like everything in life. And so he's retrieving memories, but I don't believe them for what they are. He believes them in that moment, but I think at other times in his life they would feel like different things, and also the import would be different. Paul was trying to find where's the darkness in this? Where's the bad Leonard in this story? And he invented this moment where he disowns his son. That wasn't in the book, but Paul felt it was necessary, and I agree with him, that the guilt had to be deeper and more understandable.
Yeah, I told Chase, Russell's widow, I said, I have a feeling that Russell exaggerated his bad behavior for his own self-aggrandizement purposes. And she laughed and she said, I think you're right. So, there is that element of, I was so bad you won't believe it. And then people will hear it and say, that's not so bad. And so in the book, he does bad things, but we finally added the scene where he turned on his own son, which is evil of biblical proportions, literally biblical. So tried to heighten the stakes a little bit. Then after Chase, Russell's widow, saw the film, she wrote me, she said, you were right about that. It didn't have to be. He had to be worse than Russell.
He had to be that dark, yeah.
How about you, Uma?
I mean, reading the book and talking to them about this character, he seemed very have a sense of burden of shame, and I think many people do. And for some, they are guilty of great things, and for some, they just simply feel shame, and and in fact, perhaps don't deserve to. Religion does this. Many things can contribute to people's sense of inadequacy and shame, but I think it's one of the great struggles of being a human being.
And what about the second part of the question? I do agree with this gentleman. Your character is essential to the story. He wanted to know a little bit how you approached it and how you played your character.
Oh, well, just I acted it, but and tried to do a little less. I had Paul keeping me down, thank God. But I don't know. I thought she's an interesting character, and I thought it was a portrait also of a really interesting marriage, not one that you see every day in drama and narrative. Two people with a very emotional and intellectual bond, and an amazing moment to imagine, you know, your partner fading, their mind disintegrating before your very eyes. It's a very painful moment to imagine.
All right, we got a question over there.
Hello, my name is Cristina Battocletti, coming from Italy. My newspaper is Il Sole 24 Ore. My question is for Uma Thurman. You are one of my favorite actress, and you were wonderful when you were crying on the camera. So you have answered, but my question is, did you concentrate on the script, or did you concentrate on your personal sorrow when you were acting like this so deeply?
I would concentrate it on the script. I'm quite script-driven. The script is my net and my beacon of light. But I don't know. There's a lot of thought culturally. Also, there's a lot of new information and thought about what's going on and experiencing family and dementia and losing people before you've lost them, and precarious loss, that goes on in the process of a person passing away in stages. So I was meditating on trying to really experience that in my interior imagination for the character.
All right, Cathy.
Yes. Hello, this is Cathy Imelen from Belgium, RTBF. My question is for Richard. Richard, I'm an 80 girl. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so you're an icon of my favorite movie, of course. And yesterday when you...
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No. I dreamt a lot. But when... Not when dreams. But when I saw your character yesterday on screen for the first time, I felt really overwhelmed and moved, because we see someone dying very ill. How do you deal with that kind of image of yourself, and on the set when you see yourself with the makeup and everything? Because for the viewers, it's really overwhelming. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I got the question. You know, as I said, my father passed away, and I wanted to embrace as much as I could of my father, and I do look like my father too. And it was kind of freaky when we were going through the process of aging in the film, that how much I saw myself some years from now, what I was going to look like. And assuming that I lived to be as old as my father, it's a very odd thing. Paul, he hasn't been on film. He looks at his films, and it's a different way of looking at his life. You know, actors actually see your face and your energy and everything from the time I was 26 when I started making films. Uma was 12, I think, when you started.
Yeah.
But to see yourself on film, go through your whole life. When I get an award at a film festival or whatever, and they have a compilation of my films, it's a really bizarre experience of seeing your life in front of you in 2 minutes. And so I see the characters, but I see myself. I was that person who was pretending to be that character in that. It's a very odd thing being an actor. And in film especially, because it does last. It's not like an ephemeral experience in the theater where it comes and goes back into the ether. But the document remains, and the document is powerful. But it is certainly mysterious and strange.
All right, over there at the back of the room.
Hi, Ellie Cannon.
And this is the last question.
Ellie Cownan from Screen International. Firstly, congratulations on the film. My question is to Paul Schrader. You've spoken briefly about how much the film industry has changed during your time. Francis Ford Coppola was here a few days ago saying he doesn't think traditional film studios are going to last much longer. I'm curious if you share similar concerns or any other concerns about the future of Hollywood and filmmaking. Thank you.
Oh, the future of Hollywood, we can knock that off in about 15 seconds. I've seen these changes. change is something that happens, and now change is kind of permanent. We live in an era of permanent change. You buy a computer, by the time you open the box, the computer is out of date. So it's the same thing about Hollywood. We used to know what a movie was. We used to know how long it was. We used to know where you saw it. We used to know how you financed it. We used to know how you monetized it. We don't know any of these things anymore. So the whole concept of movies is up in the air. So I can't tell you how this will morph. Television, episodic is the current future, the present. The entertainment, audiovisual entertainment, the best in the present is episodic right now. But will it be that way again? Will the theaters continue to contract? Or will they sort of become like Broadway or jazz clubs? There used to be 50 jazz clubs on 42nd Street, on 47th Street. Now there are 2. Well, it's the same thing is happening with the movie theaters. And so I don't think you can fight it. You just have to groove with it. And in my case, I'm of that generation someone mentioned earlier, where I began writing on spec. That means writing on speculation. That means not getting paid to write. I still write on spec. Writing on spec, when we started doing it in the 60s, was not done. Nobody really wrote on spec. I think Cassavetes was probably the first person to write on spec. And now fewer and fewer people write on spec because that market has dried up. So I'm just going around in a circle and I don't know what I'm saying.
I will say though, what's defining about Paul is outside of being one of the masters, he's also probably one of the most adaptive filmmakers to the current environment, to the future that you'll ever meet. Sort of the definition of an evolution of a filmmaker.
He's a guerrilla filmmaker now.
and that's why we're doing another one in the fall in a few months. Yeah.
Can you tell me more?
As it develops. Yeah.
I've written a noir as a kind of a sexual obsession thing called Non Compos Mentis. The stupid things men do for love.
It's Latin for unsound mind.
And so it's rare. David has been getting these films financed for me, and last night we had a party, and every other person David introduced me to, he said, "Oh, they put money in the film. They put money in the film." So that's how we make these films.
And you retain final cut, total authority. No one messes with it.
And David has most of the money for the next one already, and we're not even cast. We're just out to actors right now. So this one, we couldn't get the money until we were cast, but now we're getting before we're cast.
Yeah. That, again, the detail of the 2 strikes didn't help in financing the film.
Messieurs, Madame, merci beaucoup.
Merci.